Library's interview series where we talk to professionals who perform interesting work. My name's Sam Marcello, and with me this week is Shel Kahn. Hey, Shel, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing, Sam?
I'm pretty jolly. It's so nice to see your beautiful face.
Same.
I know, right? Stupid COVID. Taking us away from each other. How dare
Thank you for Zoom.
God bless you, Zoom. So before we get started on our review, I'm just going to kind of give a brief background of what Shel does. So Shel is a cartoonist and artist who works in comics, fiction, and games. Their work includes the autobio comic Bichrom, the web comic Lomi in the Abyss, and the video game Lightfingers. Shel Kahn works in Toronto, Canada, and their partner and cartoonishly large dog are very adorable. Learn more at portablecity.net. Yay!
That's me.
You're a busy bee, let me tell you.
Yes. Yeah. It's a lot of juggling plates in this field. And by this field, I mean the 4 or 5 different fields I've decided to work in.
Art is not just an umbrella.
It's many different little pools that you can hang out and dip a toe into. And
you can figure out if it's too cold or too warm.
Yeah, I decide if it's right for you that day. That's how I've been rolling.
All right. So, Shel, where does your love of art come from?
This was such a good question. I don't remember a time when I wasn't drawing. Like it was always something I was doing. When I was really little, I was drawing fairy tale characters like the 3 bears and Goldilocks, or drawing these little dragons I had invented, or rabbits. I got into a rabbit phase. So I don't know if it like had an origin, but I was really lucky that my family really supported it. Like my parents really loved art. My dad always had like lots of art books and comic books and stuff around the house. So I think it was more that it was like a natural interest, and then it was like the flames were stoked by like Tintin and Asterix comics and art books and collections of paintings by Van Gogh that would be in the house, and learning that there were artists making the art that I found on my favorite novels, or designing things to be in my favorite movies, or learning how an animated film was made just made me be like, well, if they get to draw The Last Unicorn, I could draw a unicorn. And then it turned out I really liked drawing unicorns and everything else. And I just kept going.
Well, come on, unicorns are pretty fabulous. Mm-hmm. You can make them in so many different colors, shapes, sizes. You can make them really beefy. You can make them nice and dainty.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think
you can get fun. Weird with it. You can totally get weird with it.
Heavy metal unicorn?
Heavy metal unicorn. Why not? Bone unicorn. They're out there. Somebody's drawn them. I'll draw one. Yeah, so it just seemed like there was all this possibility, and I already knew that I liked the experience of like holding a pencil and drawing something on a sheet of paper. And that really, I think, yeah, I was just supported by my family, and now look at me.
Look at all the things you do.
Nobody stopped me, and this is where we got to.
Did you want to be stopped?
No, and people did try. I mean, the reality is art is not something that it's easy to go to the career counselor and be like, I'm going to go into art. And they have to be sort of like, okay, but like what art? Because not all art pays.
Yeah.
And so it took me a while to figure out I wanted to go into commercial art, and I wanted to make art for products like games and books and comics, and that would be really satisfying. And once I figured that out, it was a fairly straightforward path to like, what did I need to do to get there? But it took me a little while to really eye on the prize.
Then what would you say are some of the challenges in your field?
I mean, there's 2 sides. There's the challenges that you have sort of internally, which is like, I don't have a boss. I have clients. So these are people that I have offered to do a service for, right? I say, I will draw you a book cover, and they say, I will pay you this much money, and I will say, what do you want in the book cover? And then they give me the instructions. So I have to learn how to manage my clients, which means learning how to talk to them, ask the right questions, set expectations, write contracts. But I also have to learn how to manage myself, which is definitely the harder of the 2 in the end. I need to know how to get myself out of bed and into my work chair at the right time every morning. I have to remember to take breaks and do stretches so that I don't slowly curl up into a velociraptor of art, which is a risk, a legit risk. Velociraptorhood is imperative. Like, it will happen to you if you don't do your stretches. And taking care of those things can be easy on an easy day that you're excited and you wake up in a good mood. You want to sit down and draw, but on the hard days, you still have to do it, and no one is showing up to tell you to do it. So I think that's the big struggle. But then there's the other side of it where it's like, I need people to pay me the right amount of money, and people generally would prefer to pay me less money. So you have to be willing to advocate for yourself and to do the research to find out how to survive in different markets. What does a market want? So it's kind of a puzzle you have to solve kind of over and over again every time you try something new. But I like that. So, I mean, it's a challenge, but it's a really satisfying one.
I'm gonna ask, like, in terms of advocating for yourself, how difficult did you find at the beginning of your career versus now?
When you get that first job, that first like big job, and you're like, oh my gosh, somebody wants my art, you'll say yes to anything because you're just so pumped, right? And you might not have enough experience to know that the timeline is a little too fast, there's not enough time to do everything well, or that the money is not really that good once you work out how long something's going to take you, or that they're kind of buying away all of the rights that you could use to generate secondary income with these pieces later, right? Maybe you're not allowed to sell an art print of any of these pieces, but you don't know to look for that at the beginning. So some of it is stuff you learn kind of on the job, and some of it's stuff you learn from connecting with other people in the same job and comparing notes.
What is a project you've enjoyed working on? Like, what's a favorite you've done? Can be recent, can be a while back.
So I'm going to take you back to that first big project of mine. So Robin Laws is a game designer who also edited a fiction line, so like short stories that are sort of fantasy in nature. And they're putting together this book. Ooh, blown right out. Thank you, webcam. The Lion and the Aardvark. And they had this cover. This isn't by me. This is by Jim Zub. But then they realized they did want to do interior illustrations. But they needed them to match. So they asked me if I could match Jim Zub's style a little bit. And you can see it's got lots of nice little swoopy thin lines. It's very elegant. It's kind of funny. So I said, sure, I'll give that a shot. And we tried it with one piece and it worked out. And then I got to do 8 pieces, and they're all of animals doing kind of weird everyday things. So this is probably my favorite from the book. It's a fox playing a game of chess. And
that is fabulous.
It's I'm like, you get better with every job you do, but you still have these pieces where you're like, I loved it. I love drawing it, and I loved seeing it in the book, and it delights me. And even if the artist I am now isn't the artist I was then, I still really, really love it. So I think this was like, it was a wonderful introduction to like what illustrating a book is like. And the content was really fun, and it was a challenge. And so it just sits in my memory as a favorite.
Okay, so moving in a slightly different direction, what is one of the more unique projects you've had your hands in? And what was rewarding about it?
So I have a couple things. I have 2 examples I want to show because I can't just do one thing. So one of them is, this is a tabletop role-playing game, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, but instead of being in a book, we published it inside a vinyl record trifold album. So the game is designed by Epidiah Ravishal, and I got to illustrate the whole thing. So this is the biggest thing I've ever painted for a client. And we had to figure out how to make an illustration work just on your shelf like this, but also spread out on the table like this for when you are running the game and you want to have all your rules in front of you. And so this was just like such a cool challenge to figure out and to plan out, what did we want? Where did we want it? How do I make the image flow over this really long, I can't even zoom back enough. How to sell that it's nighttime and it's winter. And then with the interior, looking at like these little vignettes, how do we fit them in around the text to make it feel like you're in the landscape? It was just so much fun. And Epi's a delight to work with. We've worked together in the past, and so I knew I had a good teammate going into this challenge. And yeah, I just got to go gonzo with it. Full heavy metal wolves. It was really fun.
That is such a cool way to design a game. Like,
Right?
I love the idea that it looks like a vinyl album, but you can sit it on your desk to use as
Yeah,
your DM kind of
your
like
jam screen.
That is
It's
fabulous.
it's so good. I was so impressed when he started saying that he wanted to do this, and I was like, please pick me, pick me. I want to draw the wolves.
Also, those wolves are hardcore looking.
Thank you.
No, I
I've
like
spent
it.
a lot of time looking at wolves. I've learned a lot about wolves now. They sweat through their feet. The other really fun thing I did was this was a project I did for myself. So I self-publish things, which means I make them with money from my own bank account, and then I sell them myself through a web store or at conventions. So this is what I've been calling a pocket dungeon, and it's an adventure for something like Dungeons and Dragons. So the first thing in this case is the actual adventure itself. This one's called The Corruption of Polursk. I've actually made 3 of these, but I'm showing you this one because it's my favorite. So it's just a zine, like a little publication that has words in it, and it walks you through the whole adventure. It also has some lists and some tiles illustrated in it. And the reason it has tiles is because you play it on a map. And so I thought, what if I made a fabric map to go with the game? So I made a fabric map to go with the game. And that's the map, and you can see it's got hexes on it. And as I mentioned, the book has hexes in it. And the reason the book has hexes in it is because you play the game by picking up a random hex and putting it down and then using the book to see what happens. So I also made a set of 12 hexagons made out of fabric. And then because I was looking at where to get this stuff printed and how does it work, I found a site that prints pencils with 3 lines of text on them. And so I thought it'd be really fun to print some sinister haiku on the pencils. So it says, you thought you were safe, but the crystals disagreed. How will you escape? And so I put one of these in with everyone so that the person running the game has a nice cursed pencil to run their game with. And it all packs back up into this pouch that's really easy to throw in your backpack and take with you. And you can also fold up your character sheets or whatever into there like you would into an envelope. So it's kind of bizarre, and I feel like I kind of made it up as I went along, but in the end, I really love it. And I love the idea that it's like a package and everything folds up together, and I found it so satisfying.
Your pocket dungeons are fantastic. We have not had a chance to run one yet in our house, but I love just the amount of detail like you've put into every single one of those little packages.
Thank you. Yeah, I want it to feel like a little loving gift bag that you could have for yourself and your group. And when you come to the table and you start pulling out all the fabric maps and everything, everybody gets all pumped up.
Well, here's hoping we can get back to, playing games in person again, though. I know, right?
I miss it so much.
I know. It's so hard playing D&D through Zoom. It's not the same.
It's not the same.
You try, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about a particular work. So one of my favorite things that you've illustrated and wrote was called Bichrom. It was something that when I read it for the first time, I felt like I knew you as a person at that time, which we had made friends through my husband, who was obsessed with it. And I want to know where Bichrom started.
All right, so I'll do a little Bichrom overview. So this is a book called Bichrom, and it contains a comic that I ran on the internet. And that comic was specifically about me hanging out with Conan the Barbarian and him giving me life advice. So it's these one-panel jokes where Conan says things like, arise, a new battle awaits you. And I'm having trouble getting out of bed because that's a thing that happens sometimes. And there's 82 of them in here because I ran it online for 2 years. And the way that it started was I was still in art school and I had to do a presentation and they needed a biography to read as I walked out on stage to give the little presentation. I was sitting in my room being like, I don't know, I'm still in school. I don't have like a bio. I haven't like got lists of great deeds or anything. And the friend I was with, we had been like trading Conan comics back and forth. And he was sort of like, well, why don't you just use the Conan intro, from an age undreamed of, right? And I was like, I can't use the Conan the Barbarian bio. I'm not Conan. Conan's just like my life coach. And then we decided that was hilarious, and I drew a comic about how hilarious that was. And because it's the first comic I drew, it's a little sketchy because I didn't know it was going to be a serious thing, but I drew that, and it's very much about Conan being there to guide me and me being like, yeah, I'm on Twitter. Give me a second. And then I kind of hit my stride with it, and people seem to like it. I was just posting it on Twitter and on Tumblr, and it just kind of kept building up speed and building up steam like over a couple of years. And by the end of it, I had a lot of people who were like, we want a book, like a whole book. So about 4 years after I drew my first Conan comic, I put this book together and I put it on Kickstarter. Because a book like this, that's like, it's got a barcode and there's quotes on the back, it costs quite a lot to print something like this. So I thought, I'll see if there's interest. If people really want this and they back it on Kickstarter and I get enough money to print it, then we'll do it. It turns out people really, really, really want life advice from Conan the Barbarian. So that's the story of Bichrom. It's also on the internet. You can go to bichrom.comic.com and you can read most of it there as well. So you don't need to get the book, but it is a very nice book.
It is a nice
very
book
proud
that
of.
I admit I've shared with many people just because it just brought me so much joy when I read it the first time. And I reread it once in a while just because there are certain ones that just always make me laugh or always make me really smile. So I think it's one of those things that I appreciate that you've created. And I guess, that's always a nice thing to hear, right? It's just someone loves what you did.
Oh, that's so wonderful to hear. And thank you so much. And
You're welcome.
I mean, it's been 5 years since I made this book and it's still making people happy. And that's really incredible. Like, holy cow, I had no idea when I started it that this joke would mean anything, right? Like, and you can't know at the beginning. You kind of just have to make things. Well, I mean, some of them stick.
I still have my coffee cup, so that tells you a lot right there.
Yeah, also I made merch. I made like a lot of merch. But they made me laugh, and I was like, I want a coffee cup that says "Arise" from Conan the Barbarian. I think that makes me happy. So if it makes me happy, it might make someone else happy, and I'm so glad that it does.
I think that's the best approach to when you're making merch is, I think this is delightful. I hope others think it's delightful.
Yeah, this brings me joy. So let's see if anyone else is interested.
All right, so moving in a slightly different direction, you are an art educator. So tell me about your role as an art educator and what are some of the topics you've covered?
So I've been really lucky to get to teach art in a lot of different places to a lot of different people at this point. One of the first places that I found myself teaching art was with this high school here in Toronto called the Oasis Skateboard Factory. I came in and ran some comics programming for them. And those students are already learning how to do logo design and mascot design and skateboard branding and that sort of stuff. And so it was really exciting to come in and talk about like, well, how do you take art and tell a story with it by going in sequence, and what can we do to tell different stories? And I really treasure that. Like, it was so amazing to work with them, and those students were brilliant and did things that I would never have imagined and blew my mind every single time. But I've also been lucky enough to teach art at a sort of university level as a guest lecturer. So I've been at OCAD, I've been at George Brown, I've been at Fanshawe, I've been at Brock, just sort of coming in to talk about something in particular. And it could be stuff like character design or how you can sort of channel creativity when you're working on something like a video game. You have to come up with a bazillion ideas really quickly. And that's always fun because you can get people doing that in class really quickly if you set everything up right. And people discover that they're good at something they'd never even thought they'd try before. And I think probably some of my most treasured art teaching memories are from teaching at museums. I got to teach art at summer camps at the Royal Ontario Museum here in Toronto. And the combination of like all the wonderful summer camp programming that Kieran runs, and then all of the resources of the museum, the inspiration, right? We would have a day dedicated to the blue whale exhibit that they had up at the time. And we would go down and we would learn about the blue whales. We'd talk about krill, we would talk about pressure in the ocean, we'd talk about whale fat and whale hunting. And we would talk about these enormous creatures. And then we could come back into the classroom and talk about how do you turn all that into pictures? How do you express that in your art? It was so much fun. We made a giant paper mache whale. It was really good. So I love it. And I hope to keep doing a lot of it, especially as we get out of COVID and we can get in person and get our hands on some paint and some chalk and some paper together again.
I'm trying to picture this jumbo paper mache whale, and
It
my
was
mind is blown.
It was great. We were making a sculpture to talk about plastic in the ocean. And so we had this blue whale that we paper mached, and then we built all of the interior of the whale's mouth with plastic and then filled it with more plastic. And it was like kind of haunting. I was really impressed.
Wow.
With like summer camp kids, like really, 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 really knocked me out of the water with it.
No, that sounds actually really cool. Really, really disturbing too, on the sense of, how plastic kills our oceans.
Yeah, but we got ourselves, but we educated ourselves. We figured out how to communicate about it in a way that was kind of striking. And I think that's the powerful part of art, right? Like
Absolutely.
being able to say something that has feelings and facts and everything all in there together.
Hey, Shel, can you tell me about who your artistic inspirations are?
This is such a big question. Like it's just enormous. I feel like there's no limit to this answer. I could go for days. So I keep some posters on my wall, and they're largely above the webcam. Unfortunately, I should put some lower down so I can show them off. But I have been just sort of collecting art on the internet for a really long time. But a few of the things that really kickstarted me into doing it, I think, was learning who was behind making some of the art that I loved. So one of the things that I loved so much as a kid and a teen were Final Fantasy games. And so when I picked up a game guide and I got to see some of the concept art by Yoshitaka Amano, that was like mind blowing. So there's artwork for characters in this game that these are old video games now. These early Final Fantasies, Final Fantasy VI was probably my favorite. And you can see this is a concept art drawing. And then that little green-haired sprite is a better example of what the character looks like in game. And I was like, how did this happen? How did you go from this beautiful drawing to this tiny sprite? And what was the thought process? And how did you come up with the drawing in the first place? It just gave me all these questions. And so I would definitely say Yoshitaka Amano's like concept art for Final Fantasy is like really made me who I am.
His watercolor work is still some of the most beautiful you'll ever see.
Really incredible stuff. And it took me a while to learn that just because I loved his stuff didn't mean that I was going to be making similar stuff. I definitely don't draw like Yoshitaka Amano, but his stuff taught me what I love about art. So I still bring that into my art. But I could give you 20 more artists off the top of my head. Like my first comic that I got really into was Bone by Jeff Smith. That was like, I didn't know comics could do that. I didn't know they could be funny. I didn't know they could be scary. I didn't know they could be sad. And it just did all of that in this epic adventure. And then the first sort of fantasy illustrator who I really followed her work online was Stephanie Law. And she was doing stuff for like Legend of the Five Rings, like card games and board games. And now she's an independent artist who shows in galleries. But her work is just, you can always tell the flavor. You know that it's a Stephanie Law painting because it's swirly and there's fossiled ammonites and there's shadow creatures dancing in the background and there's glowy fireflies and the ocean is there. And seeing her grow and change and explore and push herself further, it's really inspiring. And then it turns out that she is also just incredibly generous with all of her experience and her knowledge. And she's happy to answer questions. And I joined her Patreon so I could be in her Discord, and just like so grateful for everything she's done, because this is somebody whose work I've loved since I first got on the internet when I was like 11, which is for me a long, long time.
But I love that. I love when you're talking to people, especially who work in your field, a lot of people are so happy to share their wealth of knowledge in such different ways. Like, this is how I got into working with this company, or this is how I work with this particular medium, right? It's amazing to see just how open and generous the art community really, really is. And even just the kinds of levels with art. You know, not everybody, for example, does commercial art the way you do. You know, maybe they do sculpting, stuff like that. And it's impressive to see kind of just how open and honest that we can have these conversations, say like, look, this is how I did this. It's pretty cool. Want to watch me do it online?
Yeah. Yeah. Like people are using like Instagram or Twitch to live stream their process. And you can learn so much by watching what an artist is doing with paint or pencils or like programs like Procreate or Photoshop. Even if they don't have the time to narrate everything, you can sort of be like, oh, they're erasing that shape out, or they're painting opaque white over this, or what have you. It's amazing.
Do you have a particular medium that you like doing for your art? Like, because I've seen some of your watercolor before, I've seen some of your digital art before.
I love doing it all. I find that I think differently in different media. So when I'm making something for myself that's just like a one-off, I like to do it on paper and really feel the pigment and the paint. And I might use watercolor or gouache or pencil crayons are one thing. I've got those laid out right now. And you can see all of my watercolor paints behind me hung out so I can see all the different ones and know which ones I want to use. But then when I'm working on video games, sometimes I might be doing something where I'm drawing the same character but with different hairstyles. And then it makes complete sense to use Photoshop or Clip Studio Paint on my computer and copy and paste and just erase the head and draw 10 different heads with different hairstyles on them, and not make it any harder than it needs to be, and be able to do it really quickly and use tools like copy and paste and use the fill tool and stuff like that and get really, really efficient. So there's way less thinking about the drawing and more thinking about the ideas. So it's definitely like a back and forth for me. And that's part of what's fun, I think, about it.
So I guess my last question would be, what are some words of advice that you would have for anyone that wishes to pursue art as a full-time career?
So, I mean, the first thing that you need to figure out is if you like the experience of the making part, right? If you're in it because you really love showing off your final piece, that's totally cool, and you should still draw. Everyone should draw. Everybody should draw, because drawing is great. Even if you don't think you're good at it, that doesn't mean it's not fun. But if you don't find the experience of drawing to be fun, then you might want to think about how you could sort of channel that into other fields. But if you like holding a pencil and you like just putting the lines down and figuring out the piece and solving the little puzzles, then you're fine. You're going to be fine. Like, you just have to keep doing it. I think that's the hardest thing. Like when I went to like in high school in art class, I'm the only person I know from that art class that's still making art professionally. That doesn't mean people aren't like still making art that they love, but it means I'm the one that decided to go and do all the annoying part with clients. And it's because I love drawing so much that it's the only thing I want to be doing. And I'm willing to do the work of writing contracts and reading emails and all that stuff because it gets me to the drawing stage, right? I'm willing to like lay out a book and talk to printers on the phone because it supports the drawing part. So if you love that, then start making stuff, keep making stuff, and try making different things. I think we're in a really wonderful time right now where you can make a zine or make a book and you need like no permission. Nobody has to give you the thumbs up on that. You just have to make enough drawings and writing and put it all together. And you can get free programs like Scribus to lay stuff out, or like you can look at things like Affinity Designer that are very low cost that you can get into and start learning digital tools. And the more you make stuff, the more you're going to know what you like to make, what gets you excited. And the more stuff you'll have to show to people who are like, well, what do you do? What do you make? What do you like to make? Because I think it's a lot easier to hold up this and say, I want to make more of this. Hire me to do this again, than it is to be like, I just love like epic paintings, right? It's a lot easier to show than to tell when it comes to your portfolio. So make stuff so that you have stuff to show when you want to start getting paid for it. And you can get paid at any stage. You just have to find people who like the work that you're making at that moment. It doesn't mean you have to be like, I've been working professionally for 10 years, but I was getting paid at the beginning of it because I went out and found people who needed the art that I could make at that moment. So don't feel like you have to become world class to collaborate with somebody on an indie video game or illustrate somebody's first RPG adventure, right? Like, find people who are also in creative fields and start collaborating with them and just get really pumped. Make stuff is what I'm saying. Just make stuff. Tell people about it.
I mean, I won't lie. I've had to tap into artistic talents with our a lot of our summer reading club programming. I mean, I am not a great artist the way you are, but it's been so fun to actually just sit and draw things and like make examples for the programming that I'm creating. Scott's been putting them on the fridge. I mean, how lovely is that, right?
That's so sweet. And like drawing is I think in the end of it not that different from learning to read and write, right? We learn to read pictures, we get what we know out of them, and then if you draw, you start learning to write pictures, to put things in them. And maybe you're not fluent yet at the beginning, and maybe you're never going to be a poet about a drawing, but that doesn't mean you can't say interesting stuff even with a drawing that you feel isn't very good, right? So don't stress about that. It did not stop me, and I don't think it should stop you.
Those are some sage words, Shel. Sage words.
There's a wonderful meme going around, which is like, I have an arm and a pencil, and I'm going to make that everybody else's problem. And that's how you become.
That's how you become a great artist, huh?
But like, I mean, there's a difference between making art that's harmful and making art that's just like nobody gave you permission to make it. So, don't be a jerk, right? But if you like making stuff, you're going to be fine as long as you find ways to keep making stuff. And it's cool if you're doing it around a day job, right? Like sometimes my job is teaching and art is a thing I do on the side while I'm teaching other people to make art. That doesn't make me less of an artist, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when I worked at a print shop, I wasn't less of an artist. I knew what I wanted to be doing, and I was using what tools I needed to support me as I went and did it, right? I did Bichrom largely while I was in school. I was a student, but now that I'm a professional artist, we're like, what a professional piece of work. It's like, no, I was definitely like in undergrad. but I had something to say and I kept going. And I think that's like, in the end, if you can find a way to keep going and keep making stuff, you're going to find a way to make it a serious part of your life.
No, that is some fantastic advice. And you know what? Thank you so much for your time. I absolutely appreciated having you on the show.
It was super duper my pleasure. And I am so excited to encourage more people to poke around in this field. If even if you're just a tourist, come see, have fun, try making something.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And with that, we're going to end the show here today. I hope you're all doing well, and we'll be back next time with somebody else. Take care.
Thanks so much, Sam. Bye.